Okay. Blake is shaking his head already, but hello, everyone. It is Kenyon here. I'm back again. It is not a new day, but we have a new person entering the ring, and it is Tim. Coach Roache. Welcome.
How's it going?
It's been good. This is part two of the discussion. We'll fill you in later on part one, but the key thing is we're talking about the Raptors, of course, because that's kind of what we do on this channel
Yes,
until
yes.
it's time to talk about Team Canada. With that
I'm
being
more excited
said,
about that.
yeah, this is true. There have been nights where it's like, okay, it's time to go to bed now. So with that being said, let's just jump right back into it. Right now we're talking about the Bruce Brown of it all. That's the title that I put for this segment, and it's because Bruce Brown is I saw him golfing actually the other day, but he is a guy who is really almost an international man of mystery, especially with the way that the Nuggets went out. Seems like maybe they might have missed Bruce Brown, and maybe other teams could use a Bruce Brown. So, Blake, of course, is joining us as well again for another segment. But the real question that I have for you is, of course, number one, what is the over under that we actually pick up the option and trade him? I think it's really interesting that the draft is now a 2 day draft, so it kind of seems like we have a little bit more time to flush out deals. And then within that, what is your preferred path?
Yeah, so I think, in terms of putting a line on it, I think it's likelier that they pick up the option and deal him because Bruce Brown's a guy that should have a market. And we talked in part one about some of the restrictions that these higher spending teams are facing, but there's still a second tier of teams that are trying to be competitive and aren't, taxed out at this point, still have some flexibility. It's going to be a little bit of a tiptoe cap rule wise because the Raptors have to pick up the option to be able to trade him. But you might want to pick up the option and then not trade him until July 6th after the moratorium ends because then teams have more cap flexibility and stuff like that. So we might get a scenario where like a Bruce Brown trade gets reported on draft night and then we don't actually see it until, the second week of July or something like that. My lean would be toward they pick it up and find a deal for him. I don't think it'll be anything crazy. Like I think if there was a first round pick on the table for Bruce Brown, they would have made that trade at the trade deadline. And yes, teams have more flexibility and might want Bruce Brown just as much now, but you only get 1 year Bruce Brown instead of 1 year plus an extra playoff run. So theoretically the value on Bruce Brown now should go down a little bit. I think the tough part of this for the Raptors, for a front office that values flexibility so much and asset versatility and stuff like all those NBA terms and stuff. They got to make that decision. If there's not a trade there for Bruce Brown on draft night, they can't pick up the option and go into free agency hoping to trade him. That's your cap flexibility for the summer if Bruce Brown's on the book at 23 million. So I think if you don't have a trade on draft night, you're letting that option go.
Yeah, 23 million. Ouch.
That I
To
mean,
me,
yeah, Coach.
to me, it's not so much Bruce Brown like the player, it's the money. It's that contract that's a bit more difficult to work with, especially with the new CBA coming out and teams looking to crunch their numbers a little bit more than maybe what they were used to, trying to get under the first apron or the second apron, I guess, for some teams. So to me, it just sounds like it's the contract that's going to be the issue. And I like what Blake said. If you're going to trade that, well, you do have to exercise the option. But if you don't have a trade come draft night, you're gonna have to probably let him walk.
And look, there are options if you do that, right? Like just because you decline the option doesn't mean that he's gone for sure. You could sign him to a cheaper deal, sign him to a new deal, sign and trade him after that. Like you've got some options there, but the big one is like pick up the option or decline it. He's a free agent, and yeah, I don't think you can because that's your offseason then, right? Like the quickly RFA deal, whatever you do with Gary, and then if you pick up Bruce Brown's option, like that's the bulk of your flexibility there. So they got to have that one nailed down in a couple weeks here.
Mm.
And within that, obviously, comes the Boucher of it all as well. Boucher, as I put, he's someone that kind of fell out of the regular rotation from a Darko standpoint, and there could be several reasons for that. But obviously, he has been on a championship team. I think he's when he plays, is impactful. But the challenge now becomes, can you really go through another year where you may or may not play a guy who's now, heading into probably his last chance to make a deal, because it is going to be he's an expiring contract. So I'm wondering, do you see them either carving out space for him on the roster, or do you see Boucher possibly saying au revoir?
Yeah, I think au revoir is a possibility. He was available at the trade deadline if
Yeah.
you were willing to, and I don't even mean take on the contract in that it's a bad contract necessarily. Like 10.7 or 10.8 for Boucher next year for a good bench big is like fairly reasonable, especially with no term on it. But yeah, he was there. If you would have given the Raptors a halfway decent second, you could have got him. Teams didn't do that, and some of the teams that made similar deals to that at the deadline didn't have kind of a bad player making $8-9 million to make the cap math work. You'd have to send out, like, the only team that really did a deal like that was the Mavs, but they attached a first for Daniel Gafford. Like, that's a higher level deal than what the Boucher one would have been. So I think they'll be in a similar spot. Like, I think they like Chris, like, as a culture builder. He's obviously been a huge part of the organization. I think he's a tremendous dude and a good player, a good guy to have around. But yeah, at this point, if he's not in your plans, and it certainly doesn't look like he's in your plans, he was out of the rotation a number of times last year. His minutes were down when he did play. I don't mean it like you owe that player to find him a new home. This is, if you get paid $11 million to sit on the bench, so be it. But I do think it makes sense for all involved to, explore that again and let people know, yeah, it's, if you want Chris Boucher, you could get Chris Boucher for taking on the money, or sending a lower salary back or something like that. Maybe it ends up being, it's part of a bigger deal with more pieces flying around, because that 10.7 million is a pretty helpful number to like make bigger trades work as a mid-tier salary. But yeah, I think Boucher is very much in play.
Yeah, I'm surprised Boucher there hasn't been more talk about Boucher because he's got easier contract to move. And and I think, there's been discussions. I think, we mentioned Sampson earlier. I think he had mentioned over the holidays, I think, or just before the break, or I should say the trade deadline, that teams like Boston might be interested in him, and some other teams, like, where you could see some teams even playing right now where you could say, you know what, we just mentioned Denver. Sure, they could use another guy off the bench in this case here that will help in this case, they help with the rebounding issues and stuff like that. Like, I just think I'm surprised he wasn't moved then. I do wonder a little bit. I guess I'll put it back to you, Blake. Is it possible to see on draft day where he's moved with one of the picks, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, that's possible. I mean, I haven't looked through, what guy that would be. If the Raptors had got their top pick, then yeah, I definitely think one of those picks could have been on the move for sure. We'll see. I don't imagine this is a draft. Kenyon used the term flat earlier. I don't imagine in a flat draft you're all that eager to, trade assets to move up, because, a flat draft suggests you could probably just wait and get a guy that you like just as much. But yeah, I think there are going to be a number of machinations there. And, I don't think the Raptors should be in the business of trading too many picks away, given that they're just getting out of being at a pick deficit now and they don't have enough good young talent. But, if Boucher and one of those picks gets you a good young player with a couple years of deal left, if it's the right player, you can explore that for sure.
So Will Lou, I want to credit him, so I'm going to credit him. If I'm wrong, please correct me. During the presser, he asked Masai, this is a season-ending presser, basically, well, how long would a rebuild take? What is the timeline? Because, we keep seeing 3 to 6 years. Now, Masai also said, if it's 6 years, it almost hinted towards almost like the Magic Johnson. I might not be here no more. So at that point, I guess my question is, how long do you, I've half jokingly said, like, worst case scenario, we're like Sacramento before Sacramento became what they are now. But I guess, yeah, my question is, how long do you see this taking? Like, where do you see us? Sometimes I get a little bit of flack on this channel for, seemingly being a little bit down on next year.
Yeah, I think they would like to be competitive next year. I think this front office has told us for a decade that they value winning and being competitive as a part of player development and a part of growing the organization. I think they would look back. I think what they're trying to do right now is not a full tear down. It's trying to get back to where they were on the way up in like 2014, 2015, 2016, where yes, they were winning, but they were also developing young players, developing young players so that yes, you have a better team and you have more depth, but also said that if you trade guys away, you have guys who are less expensive and ready to come up and step up. If you trade DeMar and Jakob Pertl and Jonas Valanciunas and CJ Miles and DeLon Wright, you still have enough depth to compete for a championship. Like Norman Powell was the 11th man on one of those teams on the way up. Like that's how deep that group was at one point. So I think they're trying to get back to that where they can do a little bit of both. It's obviously more difficult than just leaning into the teardown or whatever. I think if they were to be better this year, we're talking about like, yeah, your goal is probably then, hey, could we get the 6th seed? Could we avoid the play-in? Realistically, you're probably jockeying for play-in position. I know that sounds low, but like they won 25 games this year. And even if guys have been healthy down the stretch, they probably win 32, 33. We're not talking about a 40-win team that just got hurt a bunch. So I think if this front office, like if you could shoot the front office with truth serum, they would like to be back to being really competitive in a meaningful way by the 2025-2026 season. Like I don't think they have the stomach for a long rebuild. I don't think they want to go into like year 6 of Scotty Barnes, RJ's next contract 2 years from now, and still have question marks about like, are we competitive? Are we good? What's our timeline? Like, I think they would like, with quickly RJ and Scotty all kind of entering those peak years, I think they would like, within the next year and a half to be back to playing pretty meaningful basketball.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts beyond it. Yeah, or
I get the impression that do you think this team could be a play-in team next year?
I mean, play in? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's not I'm not locking it in or anything, but like there's some bad teams in that play-in tournament, man. Like that was not a good Chicago Bulls team. It was not a good Atlanta Hawks team. I know the Hawks landed the number 1 pick, but some team will come back down to earth a little bit. Some team will have injuries. It's not as if Brooklyn, Charlotte, Washington, and Detroit are poised to take big jumps and knock you down a peg. So I think that could be like a reasonable goal. I'm not. They finished 11 games out of the play-in, so it's not a lock that they would get back there. But they also played a quarter of a season not playing any players. Like Malik Williams started a game and played 31 minutes. I'm not using any of that data for projecting ahead for next year for that team.
Right.
So yes, yeah. I think they could be in the play-in mix is the answer to that. But it's not. I'm not like locking them in for the 7 seed or anything like that. Is all.
So maybe not getting through the play-in.
The Miami are still safer now.
Fair enough. Because I think for me, I think that there's a danger of being stuck in the middle if you try to come up too fast. So what I mean by that is obviously there's some people that want to take a swing now that we have some picks and some control over your future. And I am really concerned about doing that with the
well there's 2 types of swing, so I got to ask which type of swing you mean, because I've heard you've got picks that you can now trade for help now and add to the IQ RJ Scotty core, and I've also heard people who want to do the swing of like basically like fake injuries for all those guys for the whole season and get Cooper flag. Like there are 2 very different swings you could take there with that justification.
I don't necessarily think that they have to take the ladder swing to get there.
I don't think you try telling those guys to win 25 games again. Good luck.
Yeah, it just I'll just say, hey guys, have at her, and we'll see I'll see you at the end of the season. Where you end up is where you end up, because I mean we saw, I mean, if it weren't for them trading their pick, Brooklyn would have been a top 3 pick this year, right? Yeah. And they didn't need to have they weren't in our position, that's for sure. They were better than us. So, I mean, even the year that we got Scotty, we were 7th or 8th, I think, then we jumped up 7th. So, I mean, you don't really have to be the worst of the worst to really have a chance at like getting into the top 4. But more, I was concerned about the other swing.
I'm a Pistons fan. I know you don't have to tell me.
So yeah,
but sorry. I see Detroit next year being potentially better because they're going to have a ton of money and their young group that they have. I just don't see them being that bad as they were this year. So even with the Raptors, I'm going to sound pessimistic here a little bit, but even with the 2 draft picks, maybe a free agent signing or 2, let's face it, the last 25 years has been great for free agent signings. Let's just call it for what it is. I'm not saying it's such a bad thing if you're not that good next year. I just see it as part of the developmental trajectory of the team. Get a young team. You have a foundation now, but now it's time to build on that foundation by finding more young players to add to a core.
And that was kind of my point, Coach, in the first segment of this was like one of the benefits of not conveying the pick this year, as much as that does cost you a young player who could be in the mix and learning with these guys. You don't have to worry about, you don't have to stress about that in the same way next year, right? Like you could just kind of play it out and like, hey, if you guys, if you accidentally win 40 games and jump the play in, awesome. That means things are ahead of schedule and guys are clicking. If you win 32, 33 and you're in the lottery mix, like it's not, a franchise altering bad outcome, right? So I'm with you to some extent there.
So before I get to our final segment, I would say, so are you suggesting that this is a year where we're evaluating?
No, we're not using those terms anymore. No patience, flexibility, optionality, all those words are out, man.
I think that's scarred Blake in this case.
Yeah. Well, I'm hearing it from too many teams I cover at once,
Is brilliant. It really is. It's
we scarred a generation of Raptor fans.
We need a new lexicon here. So with that being said, our final topic before we all got to get out of here is this. Blake, we've talked about analytics both positively and negatively on this channel. I'm big on analytics in some ways, but I also feel like it has too much of an emphasis on where the game is heading. I remember seeing a YouTube video not that long ago. The guy did a really good job, actually, but he was talking about things like isolation being a problem that needs to be solved, for example, and it was just very cold in the language. You have talked about how it's good that there's an emphasis for analytics in sports, but that, perhaps it has a bit of a PR problem. So I don't know, where you meet in the middle. Obviously, we just talked before this about the Jays and baseball in general, their problem, but I don't know. Do we have a hedge fund problem in the NBA, basically?
Not as much in the NBA. I think, there is still enough of, and basketball, each individual player has such an outsized importance compared to the NHL or Major League Baseball. Like nobody in those other sports can play 40 minutes a game and have the ball in their hands every single time, right? So like you can still look at that stuff. I think the data is valuable. I think it's fun come MVP debate time to fire up dunks and threes and see, oh, Shea's a little bit ahead of Jokic in the EPM race. I don't think putting out tweets about like here's the ranking of guys BPM over the last 7 days, and this means this guy has been the best player. Like all these things. And so when I say it has a PR problem, first of all, I mean it more on the baseball side. Second, it's more like it's on all of us and how those stats are used, but mostly like from the team side, the way this stuff gets integrated for most teams anyway is not some like, there are people who like have MBAs and stuff like that in front offices, but it's not like it looks in Moneyball where Jonah Hill is pointing at the chart and then Brad Pitt runs down and tells Philip Seymour Hoffman, "Hey, you won't play our guy, so we're trading away your guy." Like it's not that. It's more.
I guess for us it'd be the IBM Watson, kind of tweeting out the chat GPT style, don't do it.
This is what the rotation is, that kind of thing.
Bruno Caboclo.
Yes. Yeah. Although that was not an analytically friendly.
That was pre-Watson. Pre-Watson.
Yeah. This was pre-Watson too, but I do remember DeLon was like the big like analytic pick. Like, oh, he's an overage guy, but only played 2 years at a big program because he went to JUCO and stuff like that. Like the floor was so high for DeLon Wright. Jakob was another one where it was like there was like a 0.1% chance that Jakob wasn't like an NBA rotation caliber guy, just given what he'd done. Anyway, I guess just something about those two guys in Utah, maybe. So yeah, look, in basketball, I think most people are pretty reasonable about it. I don't see that many people anymore whose analysis is like, well, here's the points per possession on isolation from synergy, and that means X, Y, and Z. I think, Seth Partnow's book, Mid-Range Theory, if you guys have had a chance to check it out, does a good job kind of using the superstar dynamic to explain these changes where like, yes, the numbers side of things and trying to be more efficient and stuff, push the game a little bit more out to the 3-point line, created all this space, but that doesn't mean like the mid-range is dead. It just means like a David West doesn't exist anymore. And now when Kevin Durant operates in that space, he actually has more space to operate within. We've cleared out the superstar space for superstar usage. You just don't want, again, I don't want to pick on David West, a 17-foot assassin, but like that, like you're not running Chris Paul, David West pick and rolls for like short jumpers at the elbow anymore. It would make more sense to do that from 3, and then that would open up even more space for Chris Paul's mid-range and floater game. That's the kind of place that like I think analytics has some value and has helped kind of push offenses forward and stuff. I'd mean it more on the baseball side, where like baseball, the Blue Jays and their analytics team, they really have a PR problem.
Don't start me, please don't.
I know, and it's like, look, trust me, the analytics department is not spitting out something that says our players should hit less home runs and they should be worse and our bullpen should suck.
Okay, just one baseball question, Blake. Are they allergic to a hit and run? I'm just curious. Does that exist?
You got to have a guy on first base to hit and run, though.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's and like, look, I pulled numbers at one point in the season because I was scratching my head. They were like they've gotten better now, but at one point they were like dead last in stolen bases. I was like, if you're struggling to score, like get running, right? And this is stolen bases is an interesting one, like analytically, because the numbers have said that, like, yeah, stolen base wasn't all that valuable, in the late 90s, the amount we use it and stuff. But now, as offense has come back down, the fewer runs you're scoring as a team, the more valuable that extra base is. So that's part of why, in addition to the pitch clock and stuff last year, we saw stolen bases go back up. Like there's a numbers case for that as well. The Jays were in last, and then I looked at how many times they had a runner on first base with nobody on second base. And like a third of their opportunities were Vlad, Kirk, and Vogelbach. So God. Like, of course they're not stealing any bases.
Oh, see, that is literally the Houston Rockets right there. See, that's what drives me up the wall. There's all this space here within 50 to 18 feet, guys. You can use that,
Yeah. So anyway, Kenyon, with respect to the analytics PR problem, like it's mostly a jokey thing. It just, in baseball, basically the way it's been branded is analytics is anything you don't like. Lineup's bad, analytics. Guy didn't hit a home run, analytics. Pull Jose Barrios way too early in a playoff game. And this is where, like, sometimes I try to explain to people, like, if I'm the analytics guy, and I don't really consider myself like just an analytics guy, but if I am an analytics guy and I hate that move, how are you telling me then that it's like, how is that true? And it's an analytics move. Like, there's got to be a little bit of wiggle room in here for us to all just be like reasonable people and have it like, okay, that's what the numbers say. I'm throwing him out this time. I want my starting pitcher, who I pay $110 million to pitch a second time through the order.
As no one wants to own that. That's the reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was Watson.
The analytics department it's basically bad to own a pair of khakis now. As our Kevin Barker loves to say.
Yes. So I've filled in for Jeff Blair a couple times this year, and Barker and I have a good back and forth where like he'll tease me about the number stuff or whatever. Yeah. I told him I don't own a pair of khakis, so I gotta like, I thought about the last time I hosted with him to going out and like buying a pair and wearing them in and just really leaning into the character. But no, like I feel this way about basketball too, and people seem to have a better grasp on it on basketball. I think that stuff is helpful. It's helpful for someone like me who's in media and like, I like going out and play sports. I never played, basketball at a high level or baseball. Hockey was the highest level that I played anything in. That stuff is helpful for me. It can make me smarter about the game. But when I see something like that, I still want to go down to the ballpark and grab Joe Siddle or Caleb Joseph and ask their ex-player perspective. Grab Davis Schneider and ask him about it if I'm seeing it. Talk to Kevin Gosman about it. Like, I don't think that stuff's supposed to be used as like this replaces the institutional knowledge of like being on the field and understanding the game. It just like it kind of helps bridge the gap, and we can all talk baseball a little more cohesively together. And I think, I hope I do a good job of that. And on basketball, it does seem like basketball in general, excluding some of the worst accounts on Twitter or whatever, but like you can have a good basketball discussion that acknowledges that kind of stuff and it doesn't derail the conversation,
Yeah, man,
for sure.
I'll just say in this case here, I like Jalen Rose, man. It can be part of the toolbox. It doesn't need to be the entire toolbox.
Exactly.
Yes. Yes, and it's interesting too because you watch the playoffs, and also I'll just ask the very quick question of: are you rooting for anyone now?
Anyone but Boston. Anyone
there
but
you go.
Boston.
You can come on
There you
anytime.
go.
You can come on
Yeah.
anytime, Blake.
Exactly.
You guess.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. But but in terms of yeah, I've just noticed that yeah, overall the discourse for basketball seems to be uh, there's a push and pull, which is good, but sometimes the push towards analytics is a bit too much. Where you do see some people where they're very super hyper focused on, you know, Scotty Barnes will be a good player if he shoots X amount of threes per game and blah, and it's like it doesn't work like that.
No,
Like,
and here's another way to put it too, is like like this is again, this is more of a baseball example because we have all these like expected stats, like, oh, if Vlad hit the ball this amount of hard, we would expect this many home runs or this slugging percentage. But like here's what actually happens. Here's what the numbers say we would have expected to happen or should have happened. The whole, like, how you win a championship and how you be better is figuring out that gap, right? Like figuring out not only what caused that gap, but like how to create that gap positively or shrink that gap negatively. Like if you are, if your numbers are telling you, well, this should have happened and it's not happening, you got to figure that out. That's where it's useful. It's not, you can't just keep saying, well, the expected, points per shot is this. So look, you only get to play the game once. You only get to take that shot once. You can't do the Moneyball thing 20 seasons in your MLB The Show or NBA 2K, right? Like you can't just simulate it a bunch of times. These are all like discrete events. So you got to use that information, but it can't be everything.
well, and this is why some of the best coaches, and Beyond and I have had this conversation, aren't zealots, as he would call them. They're coaches that, yeah, you have a philosophy, but they're willing to be a little bit more flexible. Tim and Beyond, I'll give you guys the last word, because, you guys all, you grace me with your presence all the time.
I said my piece about the toolkit. I totally agree with what Blake's saying. I think it could be used in the right way, but I just don't want coaches and management teams to just be relying on it solely. And I don't think it's good for the game from a pure aesthetic standpoint either, to be honest with you, for any sport.
Yeah. I mean, numbers are numbers and they are important to every sports league in the world, but don't let your eyes fool you as well. Sometimes trust your eyes and trust what you see on the court.
I'll just say sometimes you do want to put your phone down so you can watch the game. Blake, it's been wonderful having you. I hope that we haven't scared you off.
No, it's been great.
You'll come again at some point. I know you're a busy guy, but obviously you're a little less busy because now you don't have like 4 sports to cover.
Just one for right now, and let's hope they can keep beating bad teams so there's something to talk about in July.
That's true.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, as I always say, it's you're in. This is how I would describe Blake. 2 ways. Number one, you're kind of the you're in a positive way, so don't take it the bad way. You're kind of the Stephen A. Smith in terms of the amount of hats that you wear at your current company. And then the other thing, although I haven't seen a tunnel walk yet, you might have to have that next season. The other thing is, in many ways, because of the high level that you do it at, you're kind of the Renaissance man of covering sports from a Raptors Toronto sports standpoint, which is really awesome to see. So yeah.
Well, I don't know about all that, but I appreciate the kind words. And it's been cool to do this podcast because you and I have been DMing for so long and met at a couple of the Raptors Republic events and stuff. So nice to get to chop it up with you guys and see, well, virtually see a couple of you guys again.
Hope all is well. When you see him, say hi to Mr. Will Liu, and the other guy that I'm reading his book, Mr. Alex Wong. I lost the book and then I found it again, so I'm kind of like, I'm trying to catch up on it. But yeah, is there anything that you want to plug for yourself before we get out of here?
No, not really. I mean, for the Will and Alex thing, I would imagine anyone listening to this is already following them and stuff, but I think they're going to probably put some more information out about what's next for them soon. Shout out to Jerome Chang as well, who's going to be joining them. If you guys missed that Black Dragon role, really excited for what's next for those three. Nice. And I guess Jay's Talk Plus is 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. if you're also a baseball person.
Of course.
I don't know.
Of course.
Well, I get you on Spotify, Blake. I listen to you guys. So, yeah.
With that being said, it's been fun. Everyone has to get out of here. So people, like, comment, subscribe. I'm obviously going to drop, all the important things in the description down below. And take care, and everyone enjoy a little bit of the summer because it's nice. So yeah. Take care and peace.